I had always believed that family was sacred. In my world, loyalty was the highest form of love, and the bond between brothers was unbreakable. My brother Marcus and I had shared everything: our childhood, our dreams, and later on, the family business. We both knew what it meant to work hard for our father's legacy. My father, a man who built everything from the ground up, was the rock we both relied on. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. When he passed away, everything changed. It wasn't the grief that hit me first, though that was overwhelming. It was the realization that something was wrong, something I couldn't put my finger on until my daughter Lily pointed it out. She noticed the will right away. "Dad, you need to see this," she said, voice shaking as she handed me the folded paper. I could tell something was off from the way her hands trembled. I'd always thought I knew my father's wishes. I'd always assumed that, being the older son and having worked alongside him for decades, the family fortune would be divided as it always had been, a fair share for Marcus and me. We'd built this empire together, even though Marcus had distanced himself from the business years ago. He'd always been the golden boy, the charming one, the one everyone gravitated to. I wasn't jealous. I had my role, my place in the company, and I was content. But that will? It shattered everything. I sat down at my father's old desk, my heart thudding as I scanned the document. It was there in black and white. The inheritance that should have been split equally had been handed entirely to Marcus. The house, the business, every dime of our father's legacy, all of it for him. It wasn't set just a will. It was a betrayal. The more I read, the more the blood rushed from my face. I looked up at Lily, who was standing by the door watching me with wide eyes. My mind couldn't process the words I had just read. "Lily, this can set be right. This has to be a mistake." But it wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. My brother Marcus, the one who had always been there for me, the one I thought was my closest ally, had done this. He had manipulated our father's will, arranged things so that, in the end, everything would fall into his hands. I felt my stomach tighten. I wasn't just angry, I was gutted. How could Marcus do this to me, to our family? The betrayal was like a knife, cutting deep into everything I had believed in. I had always trusted him. We had always shared the same dream to honor our father's legacy. But Marcus had turned that dream into his own selfish empire. He had turned his back on me and our father's legacy. And for what? Power, greed. I didn't know what to do with myself. The pain was suffocating, and the anger, it was a fire burning inside me, impossible to ignore. I couldn't just let this slide. I had worked my entire life to be part of something bigger than myself. This business, our father's legacy, it was mine too. But Marcus had taken that from me. I needed evidence, something concrete. I couldn't let him get away with this. I needed to find the proof, the documents, the transactions, anything that could expose him. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized how far Marcus had gone to hide his betrayal. It wasn't just the will, it was everything. I pored over old bank statements, emails, and receipts. Each document uncovered another layer of deceit. Marcus hadn't just stolen our father's fortune. He had manipulated the system, covering his tracks with ruthless precision. He had used every trick in the book to secure his grip on everything, and I had been too blind to see it. I thought I knew my brother. I thought I knew the man he had become, but I didn't. He wasn't the brother I had trusted. And as I sifted through the lies, the betrayal became clearer. It wasn't just about the money. It was about power. Lily Sip's voice broke through my thoughts. "Dad, what are you going to do?" Her question hung in the air like a weight. She had seen the change in me, the hurt, the anger, the obsession that had started to take over. She didn't understand, not yet. She was torn between me, her father, and Marcus, the man she had always looked up to. But this wasn't just about money. This was about justice, about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. "I'm going to get it back, Lily," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I'm going to take back what this was ours. And I'm going to make sure Marcus pays for what he's done." She looked at me, unsure, her eyes filled with concern. "How?" "I'll figure it out," I replied, though I had no idea where to start. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let Marcus win, not like this. Not when everything I had built was slipping through my fingers. The anger was unbearable at first, a storm raging inside me that I couldn't quiet. It felt like I was constantly on the edge of exploding. I tried to distract myself, tried to move through the motions of everyday life, but it was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that will, the paper that had ripped my world apart. Lily, bless her heart, tried to be there for me, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. She was torn between her love for me and the loyalty she felt to Marcus. She didn't understand why this betrayal had hit me so hard. I kept telling myself it was about more than just money, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The money, our father's fortune, was part of it, but it was everything else that hurt: the trust, the love, the years of shared history. All of that had been taken from me, and I couldn't get it back. I remember the day I broke. It wasn't a loud, dramatic moment. It was quiet. I was sitting in the living room, staring at the fire burning in the hearth. The warmth should have been comforting, but all I could feel was cold. I thought of my father, of everything he had worked for, and how it had all been taken from me. And then I thought of Marcus, my own brother, who had done this. I had always believed Marcus was the one who would take care of things when the time came. We had always joked about it, the two of us, about how we'd share everything one day, split it down the middle. That was the way my father had always made it sound. But this was different. Marcus had built his life on lies, and now he was turning our entire family into a house of cards. And I wasn't sure if I could stop it from collapsing. That evening I went into the study, the room that had once been my father's sanctuary. I felt as though I had no place there anymore, like the house itself had turned against me. The leather chair where my father used to sit felt cold and empty, and the walls, once filled with warmth, seemed to mock me. I ran my hand over the polished wood of the desk, my fingers lingering on the old family photo sitting on the corner. It was a picture of us, me, Marcus, and my father, before things had changed, before all the lies. I don't remember how long I sat there, but eventually I was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Lily, looking hesitant. "Dad, we need to talk," she said softly. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to explain myself. I didn't want to tell her what I was feeling, because I knew she wouldn't understand. But I also knew that I couldn't keep going like this. I had to say something. "I don't know what to do, Lily," I whispered, my voice cracking. She stepped into the room and sat beside me. Her eyes filled with concern. "You stirred my father. I Sep never seen you like this. You Step've always been strong, but this isn't Sept you. What Sept's really going on?" I let out a breath, a long, shaky exhale. "It Sep's not just the money, Lily. It Sep's everything. It Sep's the way Marcus betrayed me, the way he took everything from me, from all of us. I thought I knew him, but I didn't Sepstet. I don't Sepstet know who he is anymore." Lily was silent for a long time, her gaze lowered. She looked like she was processing what I had said, trying to make sense of the mess that had become our lives. "I don't, Sue, want to lose you, Dad," she said finally. "But I also don't, Sue, want to lose Marcus. You Sip both my family." I felt a sharp pain in my chest at her words. She wasn't wrong, she was caught in the middle of this mess, and it was tearing her apart. I reached out and put a hand on hers. "I never wanted you to be caught in the middle of this, but I can just let him get away with this, Lily. I have to fight for what's sis mine, for what your grandfather worked so hard to build." Lily squeezed my hand. "I know, but please, don't tell it destroy you. Don't tell it this thing with Marcus change who you are." I wanted to promise her that I wouldn't let it change me, but the truth was, I didn't know if I could hold on to who I was much longer. The rage, the sense of betrayal, was consuming me. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone driven only by the need for revenge, and I couldn't tell Lily that the hardest part wasn't the anger. It was the grief of losing the brother I had once trusted, the brother I had once called family. By the time I'd walked away from that conversation, I knew I couldn't do this alone. I had to bring in help. It was time to get legal advice, to start fighting back. I couldn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself. I had to take action, and I needed someone who could help me navigate this mess. I called Daniel, an old lawyer friend of mine. He was one of the few people I trusted, someone who had always had my back. I needed him now more than ever. "Daniel, I need your help," I said when he answered the phone. "I've got you, Simon. Tell me what's going on." I explained everything to him: the will, the fraudulent transactions, the way Marcus had maneuvered himself into complete control. I told him about the bank statements and the emails I had found, the recordings that proved Marcus had been behind the scheme all along. "What do I do now?" I asked him. "How do I get this back?" "There's steps away, Simon. We still start gathering evidence, piece by piece. You steps not alone in this." As we talked, I started to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe there was a way to expose Marcus for what he really was: a liar, a thief, a man willing to destroy his own brother for his own gain. But I wasn't going to stop until I had everything. I wasn't going to let Marcus get away with this. The anger had morphed into something else now, something colder, more calculated. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was methodical. Every night I sat up late scanning through my father's old files, pulling out bank records, and analyzing every detail I could find about Marcus's dealings. There had to be a way to break his empire, and I wasn't going to stop until I found it. I hadn't told Lily everything. I couldn't. She wasn't ready to understand the full extent of what Marcus had done. She saw me as the victim, and I was grateful for that. But what she didn't know was that this wasn't just a battle for money. This was about family, about the lies that had been hidden behind the smiles and the fancy dinners. And it wasn't just Marcus I had to fight. It was the people who had helped him get away with it. The financial advisors, the lawyers who turned a blind eye, and anyone who'd looked the other way while he bled our family dry. It was strange. For years I had been so focused on keeping the family together, but now my focus had shifted entirely. Marcus had stolen my peace, my trust, my future, and it was time to take it all back. I met with Daniel in person the next day. We chose a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town, away from prying eyes. The last thing I needed was Marcus catching wind of what I was up to. I had to move in the shadows, taking calculated steps while keeping my emotions in check. "Simon," Daniel said as I sat down across from him, "I seps looked through the documents you sent over. There's seps definitely something here. It's seps not going to be easy, but we seps got enough to start piecing it together." I nodded, tapping my fingers on the table. I could feel my pulse quicken, the first real sense of hope since this whole nightmare had started. "What do we do now?" "We start with the legal filings," Daniel said, sliding a folder in front of me. "We need to get the original copy of your father's will, the one before Marcus changed it. Then we need to focus on the assets. I know it's not going to be a quick process, but if we expose the fraud, Marcus won't have a leg to stand on." I picked up the folder and glanced through the papers. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together. It was as if a door I hadn't known existed had opened, and for the first time I saw a clear path forward. Daniel continued, his voice low, careful. "We said also need to track down the financial advisor who helped Marcus. There's such a chance he's such complicit in all this, but we need to be careful. If he's such involved, he could be a key witness." I leaned back in my chair, absorbing the weight of his words. "So we go after Marcus Sipsis' allies first?" "Exactly. We dismantle his support system piece by piece. Get the advisor to talk. He might be more willing to cooperate once we have the right leverage." The idea made sense. Marcus had always surrounded himself with people who were more than willing to look the other way as long as it benefited them. Now I had to turn that advantage on its head. The people who had helped him weren't untouchable. They had their own skeletons. If I could find them, they would become my greatest weapons. I could feel the plan taking shape in my mind. It was methodical, it was patient, and it was exactly what I needed. But there was one more thing I had to do, something that Marcus would never see coming. The family estate, the house, the symbol of everything our family had built. Marcus thought he had it locked down, but I knew better. The house was more than just a building. It was a symbol of control, of power, and I wasn't going to let him have that either. "I need to get into the house," I said, my voice steady, almost cold. "I need to start putting the pressure on him directly. If I take back the property, if I show Marcus that he can just keep hiding behind the walls, he's settle crack. He's settle slip up." Daniel nodded, his eyes sharp. That SIP's risky, Simon, but it could work. If you play it right, it SIP send a message. I stared at the folder in front of me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about making Marcus understand that I wasn't the weak brother he thought I was. I wasn't the man who would sit back and let him get away with this. No, this was war now, and it wasn't just about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. It was about exposing Marcus for the fraud he truly was. I left the coffee shop that day with a new sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long and dangerous, but I was ready. Ready to turn the tide. Ready to watch Marcus unravel as I pulled the strings. The next few weeks were a blur. I made calls, gathered documents, and met with people I hadn't spoken to in years. Each piece of information brought me closer to my goal, but I knew the real battle hadn't even begun yet. Marcus was still out there, still holding on to everything he thought he had taken from me. But now, I had something he didn't control, and I wasn't going to let go of it. The plan was set. But I knew better than to rush in. This wasn't about wild action or sudden bursts of emotion. Marcus had built his life on control and manipulation, and if I was going to take him down, I had to do it just as carefully, layer by layer. Every move I made had to be precise, calculated, and deliberate. It started with the house. Marcus had no idea what was coming, but I had been planning for weeks, carefully laying the groundwork to take back what was mine. I knew the house was more than just a place. It was the center of his empire. The family home, the one he thought he had locked down, was his biggest point of leverage, but I wasn't going to let him keep it. It was time to start stripping away his control, one piece at a time. I had access to my father's old legal documents, things that Marcus hadn't thought to hide, and I used them to initiate a claim on the house. It wasn't just about property rights, it was a statement. A statement that Marcus's grip on everything was slipping, and that I was in charge now. The first step was easy enough. I filed the claim, and with it came a series of legal notices. Marcus wasn't expecting them, and I knew it would rattle him. I didn't care how small the victory was, every inch I gained was one step closer to bringing him down. But while I was executing the legal side of things, I also had to keep an eye on Marcus. I knew his routine, his every move, every meeting, every phone call. It wasn't difficult to track him. All I had to do was sit back and watch the cracks start to form. It wasn't long before I got what I needed. One evening, while Marcus was busy entertaining some clients at a fancy restaurant, I received an email from an old business associate who had once worked with him. The subject line was simple: important information about Marcus. I opened it immediately, my heart racing. The email contained a detailed report of Marcus's recent financial dealings, including a series of questionable transactions, some that involved large sums of money funneled through offshore accounts. This was the breakthrough I had been waiting for. I printed the email, highlighting the key pieces of evidence that tied Marcus directly to financial misconduct. With this, I could prove that he had not only manipulated the family will, but had also been involved in a web of fraudulent activity. And the best part, he hadn't covered his tracks nearly as well as he thought. The next move was more delicate. I reached out to a former business partner of Marcus's, someone who had been left in the dust after Marcus's rise to power. His name was Greg, and while he was bitter about what Marcus had done to him, he was also looking for a way to get back at him. I met Greg in a quiet bar one evening, a place where no one would recognize us. "What do you need, Simon?" he asked, taking a swig of his beer. "I need information. I need everything you know about Marcus Sip's dealings. You saw it all, Greg. I know you did." He stared at me for a moment, weighing his options. "What's in it for me?" he asked, his tone suspicious. "I am not asking for a favor, Greg. I'm asking you to do what Sep's right. You and I both know Marcus doesn't care about anyone but himself. This is your chance to make sure he pays for what he Sep's done. If you help me, I'll make sure you Seps you're taken care of. Trust me." After a long pause, Greg sighed. "Fine, got some files, they are in my safe. Will get them to you, but I need something in return." "Consider it done," I replied. It was a simple transaction, but the stakes were high. Greg's files would be the final pieces I needed to finish exposing Marcus. I could feel the walls closing in on him, and I knew he was starting to feel the pressure. But I wasn't going to stop there. No, I had a much bigger plan in mind. As I left the bar, I couldn't help but think about how much closer I was to getting everything back. The house, the family fortune, the respect that Marcus had taken from me. It was all coming together, and it felt like the pieces were finally falling into place. But even as I plotted my next move, I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was waiting for me to make my next mistake. He always did. He thought he had me figured out, but he was wrong. By the time I received Greg's files, I knew it was time to ramp things up. It was time to put the pressure on Marcus directly. He had built his empire on lies, and it was time to watch it all crumble. The next step was going to be even more dangerous. I was going to expose Marcus's financial dealings, but this time it wouldn't be in the shadows. I was going to confront him face to face, and when I did, I would make sure he knew just how close I was to destroying everything he'd worked for. I walked out of the bar, holding the files in my hand, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of my plan starting to shift. Marcus thought he had won, but I knew the truth. He was just one step ahead of the inevitable fall. I could feel the pressure mounting. Marcus was starting to crack, but I couldn't let up, not for a second. This was the moment I had been building toward for months, and every step had to be precise. I wasn't just reclaiming what was mine. I was dismantling everything Marcus had built. His empire of lies, his sense of invincibility, everything was about to come crashing down. I sat at my desk, staring at the documents Greg had given me. The files were filled with incriminating information. Documents that linked Marcus to illegal financial transactions, forged signatures, and shady deals. This wasn't just about the house or the family fortune anymore. This was about Marcus's entire life falling apart. I needed to act quickly. The longer I waited, the more Marcus would cover his tracks. I wasn't going to give him that opportunity. With these files in hand, I had the leverage I needed to force him into a corner. I called Daniel. "It's just time," I said. "I need to move forward with the plan. We can just waste any more time." "Are you sure you want to do this now?" Daniel asked, his voice cautious. "Marcus is getting more defensive. If you confront him with everything now, he said'll come at you hard." "I don't care anymore. He Sep's had too much time to get away with it. He thinks he Sep's untouchable, but I Sep's gonna show him just how wrong he is." Daniel paused for a moment before responding. "All right, Simon. Let's just make sure we have everything in place. This is the final move. We can afford to miss anything." I hung up the phone, my mind racing. It wasn't just the financial documents I had to deal with. There was still the matter of the family dinner, our annual Christmas gathering. I had always dreaded those dinners, but now it was the perfect opportunity. It was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when I would expose Marcus for everything he truly was, in front of the people who still believed in his innocence. The plan was simple. I would confront Marcus at the dinner, armed with all the evidence. I would lay it all out in front of the family, proof of his fraud, his manipulation, and his lies. The pressure of a family gathering, the one event where he could no longer hide behind his carefully crafted image, would be too much for him. He wouldn't be able to spin his way out of this one. But I wasn't going to stop there. I wanted to break Marcus completely. I wanted him to feel the sting of losing everything. His wealth, his power, and most of all, his family's respect. I wasn't going to let him walk away from this unscathed. The years of manipulation, the lies he had told, all of it would come to light, and in that moment he would realize that the one thing he had never accounted for was me, his own brother, the one he thought he had already won over. In the days leading up to the dinner, I worked relentlessly. I made sure the legal papers were in order, that everything was ready for the moment of truth. I reached out to old contacts, people who owed me favors, people who had once worked with Marcus. It wasn't just about the dinner. I needed to make sure that when I exposed Marcus, he would have nowhere to turn, no escape, no one left to protect him. The night of the dinner arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't just the usual holiday stress. This time it was different. This time the air was thick with anticipation. My heart pounded in my chest as I made my way to the dining room. I could see Marcus already seated at the head of the table, his usual smug smile on his face as he held court with the family. Lily was there too, of course. She hadn't fully grasped what I had been doing, but she knew that something was off. She kept her distance from me, unsure of how to react. I could see the confusion in her eyes as she glanced from me to Marcus, unsure of where her loyalties should lie. It hurt, but I had no choice. This was bigger than her confusion. This was about justice. I took my seat at the table, my mind focused. This was the moment I had been preparing for. I wasn't just going to take back what was mine. I was going to expose Marcus, destroy everything he had built, and watch as he realized that his world was crumbling. Dinner passed in a haze. The usual small talk, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. It all felt so far away. I barely heard the conversations around me. My focus was on one thing, Marcus. I watched him observing his every move, every smile, every lie he told. I knew what he was doing. He was trying to play the part of the perfect son, the golden boy who had done no wrong, but it was all a facade. And tonight I was going to tear it down. Finally, as dessert was being served, I stood up. The room fell silent, and all eyes were on me. "Marcus," I said, my voice steady but filled with a quiet rage. "I think it's such time we had a little talk." He looked at me, his smile faltering for a moment, before he recovered. "What's Sep's this about, Simon? You're not planning on ruining dinner, are you?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the documents, the files Greg had given me, and slammed them onto the table. The shock on Marcus's face was immediate. He knew what was coming. "Everything you Steb built, every lie you Steb told, it ends tonight," I said, my voice unwavering. "I Steb got all the evidence I need, and I Steb not leaving here until everyone knows the truth." The room was silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Marcus opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He was paralyzed by the truth. And it was in that moment that I knew the walls he had spent years building were finally coming down. The silence that followed my words felt suffocating. Every eye in the room was on me, and for a moment I could see the disbelief in Marcus's eyes. He hadn't expected this. He had spent years manipulating everyone around him, and now, for the first time, he was facing someone who knew exactly what he was. There was nowhere for him to hide now. His empire of lies was crumbling right before his eyes. I watched Marcus closely. His hands trembled for the first time. The confident facade he had built over the years was slipping. He looked to the others in the room for support, but no one spoke. My daughter Lily, who had been so torn just days ago, was silent, her eyes darting between me and Marcus. She didn't know what to make of it, but I could see the confusion in her eyes starting to fade, replaced by something stronger, understanding. "I don't know what this is, Simon," Marcus stammered, trying to regain some control. "You stir making a scene. These documents, they mean nothing. You stir just trying to tarnish my name." I could hear the cracks in his voice. The defense was weak, desperate. He was stalling, hoping to buy himself time to come up with a way out. But there was no way out for him now. "You know exactly what this is, Marcus," I replied coldly, my voice steady as I let the words hang in the air. "These documents are your downfall. You thought you could control everything. Our father Sip's legacy, the family fortune, the house, but I Sips am taking it all back." His face paled, and for a fleeting moment I saw the real Marcus, the man behind the mask of charm and manipulation. The guilt, the fear, was finally showing. But it wasn't enough. It wouldn't save him now. "You think you can just expose me and get away with it?" Marcus sneered, his voice rising with false bravado. "You stir nothing without me. The business, the house, its setup's all mine. I Sep done nothing wrong. I's been nothing without you, Marcus." I shook my head, letting the words sink in. "You Seb done everything wrong. You Seb lied, you Seb manipulated, you Seb stolen, and tonight, the truth comes out." I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, but I didn't flinch. The truth was on my side, and I wasn't going to back down. The tension in the room was palpable. My family was watching, waiting for Marcus to spin some lie, some excuse, but there was no coming back from this. Lily stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Dad, you Sep are right." Her voice was quiet, but there was strength behind it. "I didn't understand why you were doing this, but now I do." Marcus, Yusep lied to us all. Yusep hurt our family. Marcus's eyes flickered toward Lily, and for a moment I thought he might lash out, but instead he fell silent, as if the weight of her words had knocked the wind out of him. You don't know what Yusef are talking about, Lily, he said, his voice tight. This isn't Seft about you. This is about me, about what I Sefta built. You Seft are just being manipulated, just like your father always was. Lily's face hardened, and I could see her taking a step back from him, the wall between them growing thicker. Her eyes weren't filled with the same admiration she once had for him. That, more than anything, hurt Marcus. The mask was finally cracking. Enough, I said, raising my voice to cut through the chaos. Marcus, this isn't Setcha just about you anymore. It's Setcha's about everyone you Setcha's hurt along the way. The people you Setcha's manipulated. The lives you Setcha's destroyed. It's Setcha's over. You Setcha's not getting away with it. The room fell into another heavy silence. I could feel the tension thickening with every second, every word. Everyone knew what this moment meant. Everyone knew that Marcus's life as he had known it was unraveling before him. The empire he had so carefully constructed was built on lies, and now it was collapsing. Marcus's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, a way out, but there was no way out. I had him cornered, and I could see it in his face, the realization that his perfect life was over. You think you Seb won, Don True 222. Marcus sneered, his voice a little more desperate now. This one true two stick. You can set to destroy everything I said built. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of every word I was about to say. It's Sep's already destroyed, Marcus. You just didn't Sep know it yet. There was a brief pause as the words sank in. Then Marcus did the one thing I had been waiting for. He tried to deny it all. He stood up, pushing his chair back with force, his face flushed with anger and panic. You think you can expose me, Simon? You think you can take everything from me? His voice cracked. This is my family, my fortune. You can take that from me. You have no right. I met his eyes, unwavering. I don't need your permission, Marcus. You Sep already lost. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the fight to maintain control, but it was over. The truth was out, and there was no turning back now. I watched as Marcus's face twisted with a mixture of anger and disbelief. He was trying to hold on to something that was slipping through his fingers, but I could see it, the fear, the realization that his empire was crumbling piece by piece. I had one more move left to make, and when I made it, I knew it would be the end for Marcus. The holiday dinner was supposed to be a time for family, a time to come together, to laugh, to share memories, and to reflect on the year gone by. It was supposed to be a warm, joyous occasion. But in the back of my mind, I knew that this dinner was going to be anything but ordinary. For weeks, I had been carefully setting the stage, gathering the pieces of evidence, building the tension, and waiting for the right moment to strike. This wasn't just about the money or even the house. It was about everything Marcus had stolen from me. From our father's legacy to my peace of mind. Tonight, I was going to expose him for who he truly was. In front of the people who still believed in him, the people who saw him as the golden boy of the family. The moment the first guests walked in, I could feel the weight of what was about to happen. There was Lily, trying to mask her anxiety, her eyes darting between me and Marcus as the tension in the room began to mount. She hadn't fully processed it yet. She was still clinging to the idea of family, of unity, and yet I knew she could feel the shift. The house, my childhood home, felt strange now. What had once been a symbol of comfort, of family, had become the stage for this final confrontation. I could feel Marcus watching me, his usual arrogance replaced by unease, his smile forced. He knew what was coming. I had seen that look in his eyes before, a mixture of defiance and fear. As the evening wore on, I stayed quiet, letting the small talk swirl around me like a distant hum. I didn't need to participate in the conversation. I wasn't here for pleasantries. I was here for justice. The dinner went on, courses served and wine poured, but my focus never wavered. I could hear every word, every clink of the glass, every rustle of the napkins. The room was too full, too busy, too alive with normalcy to acknowledge what was about to happen. But I could feel it. and I knew Marcus felt it too. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the main course was cleared away, and dessert was being served. I could see the familiar rhythm of the evening unfolding, the final round of pleasantries before the night would come to a close. But it wasn't over yet. Not for me. Not for Marcus. I stood up. The room quieted instantly. "Marcus," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. He looked at me, his face a mix of confusion and concern. "What sip's this about, Simon?" he asked, his voice far too calm, far too rehearsed. "You Sep already made your point." I shook my head. "No, Marcus, Yusuf made your point, and it's Sep's time for everyone here to know the truth. The truth about you, about what Yusuf done, and how Yusuf manipulated this entire family." The room went completely still. Every set of eyes was on me now, and I could feel the weight of the moment. For the first time, Marcus looked genuinely rattled. His hands, which had always been so steady and composed, were visibly shaking as he tried to hide his discomfort. But it was too late. The cracks were showing. I pulled out the files I had been carefully holding on to. The papers, the evidence, the proof of Marcus's manipulation, of his greed. The room gasped as I laid them out on the table. The room was silent, except for the sound of Marcus's breathing, ragged and quick. "You thought you could hide behind your charm? Didn't set you, Marcus?" I continued, my voice low but firm. "You thought you could steal our father Sep's fortune, manipulate the will, and get away with it. But I Sep's been watching you, and now everyone here will see who you truly are." Marcus stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back, his face flushing a deep red. "You start making a mistake, Simon. This is all lies. You start trying to ruin everything I Seth worked for." "I didn't set flinch. You didn't set work for it, Marcus. You took it, you stole it, and now you stole pay the price." I slid a document across the table. It was the original family will. The one Marcus had altered. The one he had hidden from everyone. The one that proved, without a doubt, that he had forged our father's signature, altered the contents, and left me out of the inheritance entirely. I had the evidence, and Marcus couldn't talk his way out of this one. Lily stood frozen by the table, her eyes wide. Is this true?" she asked, her voice shaking. Her gaze flickered between me and Marcus, and for the first time I saw her struggle with the weight of the truth. She didn't want to believe it, but the proof was undeniable. Marcus turned to her, desperation in his eyes. "Shell, Lee, this isn't Setter what it looks like. You have to trust me. This is all Simon Seven's doing. He's Seven's trying to tear our family apart." But Lily didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence in the room was deafening, and I could see it in her face. The same realization that had come to me weeks ago. The brother she had looked up to, the man she had trusted, was nothing more than a fraud. "Enough!" Marcus shouted, his voice breaking. I didn't stop, but he was cut off when I pulled out the bank statements, evidence of the fraudulent transfers, the offshore accounts, the money funneled into Marcus's personal holdings. Everything he had done to hide the truth was now exposed. The family stared at him, and I could see the shift. The loyalty they once had for him was starting to crumble. For the first time they were seeing Marcus for who he truly was, a man driven by greed and power, willing to do anything to get what he wanted. "You don't get to control this family anymore, Marcus," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "This is over." Marcus took a step back, his face twisted with rage, but also fear. He knew this was the end. The empire he had built on lies and deceit was falling apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "You think Yusef won?" Marcus sneered, his voice hoarse. "Yusef are nothing without me? I Seb'll destroy you." I stood tall, looking him in the eye. "Yusef's are already destroyed, Marcus. You just don't test realize it yet." The silence in the room felt like it had stretched on forever, though I knew it had only been a few seconds. Marcus's face was pale, his shoulders hunched in a way I had never seen before. For once his bravado had crumbled, leaving nothing but the broken man beneath the facade. The power he had once wielded so effortlessly was gone, torn away in an instant by the truth that no one could deny. I stood there watching him struggle to regain his composure. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. The weight of the evidence I had laid before him was too much. I had exposed him completely and utterly, and now there was no place left for him to hide. Lily stood by the table, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on her uncle. She didn't speak, but I could see the disappointment in her gaze. It was the kind of look that cut deeper than any word could. Marcus had lost her, just like he had lost everything else. "What the hell is wrong with you, Marcus?" I heard her mutter under her breath. It was barely a whisper, but it hit like a slap to the face. For a moment it seemed like Marcus was going to snap. He took a step toward Lily, his face contorted in anger. But then he stopped. I could see the rage in his eyes, but it was mixed with something else. Fear. He knew the game was up. His empire of lies had been exposed, and there was nothing left to protect him. "Don't set you dare," he spat, his voice hoarse. "You think you can just walk in here and take everything from me? You don't set know what you set you're doing." But Lily didn't set back down. She shook her head, disbelief and disgust written all over her face. "You said you're a liar, Marcus. You said you've been lying to all of us for years. How could you do this to your own family? How could you do this to Dad?" Marcus recoiled, as if her words physically struck him. He looked around the room, his eyes desperately searching for some shred of support, but it was too late. His facade had shattered, and all that was left was the truth. "I didn't steal anything," Marcus stammered, his voice breaking. "This isn't set what you think." "You've been stealing from all of us," I interrupted, my voice cold and final. "The money, the house, the business, everything. You thought you could hide behind your charm and your lies, but it seps all out in the open now. And there seps, nothing you can say to change it." There was no comeback. No grand defense. Marcus was finished. The room was silent except for the sound of his ragged breathing. The weight of his guilt hung in the air like a storm cloud, ready to burst. Lilysip's face softened just slightly as she turned away from Marcus and walked over to me. "Dad, I didn't sit no, I didn't sit no, it was this bad." I put my hand on her shoulder, trying to offer some comfort. "It's sense not your fault, Lily. You didn't set know what he was doing. But you do now." She nodded slowly, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. The kind of sadness that came from losing someone you once trusted, someone you thought was part of your world. For her, it was the end of something. The end of the image she had of her uncle, the man she once admired. Marcus's eyes shifted toward the door, and for a split second I thought he might try to run. He didn't have the strength to do that, though. He stood frozen, caught between the lies he had been telling and the truth he couldn't escape. It was too much for him to process, and in that moment I realized something. Marcus had always been a master of manipulation. He had spent his whole life getting what he wanted, bending people to his will, but now he was nothing. His empire had crumbled, and there was no one left to save him, no one to protect him from the consequences of his actions. The family was looking at him now, not with admiration but with disgust. The people who once saw him as the golden boy, the successful one, were now seeing him for who he really was. A man driven by greed, willing to destroy his family for the sake of power. "Leave," I said, my voice firm. "Leave and don't set come back. You set destroyed enough." For a moment it seemed like Marcus was going to argue, to fight back. But he didn't, he couldn't. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw him as the broken man he truly was. He turned without a word and walked toward the door, the weight of his downfall dragging him down with each step. The door closed behind him with a finality that resonated throughout the house. The truth had been exposed, and Marcus's reign had come to an end. Lily looked up at me, her expression softening. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice quieter than before. I let out a deep breath, a weight lifting from my shoulders that I didn't set even realize was there. "Now we rebuild. We take back what said is ours, and we move forward." The family had been fractured by Marcus's actions, but I could see the possibility of healing. The wounds were deep, but they weren't permanent. We would move on, piece by piece. We had to. "I said I'm sorry for everything, Dad," Lily whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't nest and understand, but I do now. I just wanted to believe in him. I know, Lily, I replied, pulling her close. I know. Marcus was gone, but the damage he had caused would take time to repair. What he had done couldn't be undone, but at least now we knew the truth. We knew who he really was. And that was a start. The night was still, the tension having dissipated, but the work was far from over. We had a long road ahead of us, but I was ready for it. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of the past few weeks lifting. I had taken back what was mine, not just the house, the business, or the money, but the truth. And that was the most important thing of all. The days following Marcus's departure were a blur. The house, once filled with tension and secrets, now felt eerily quiet. It was a strange kind of peace. A peace built on the destruction of everything Marcus had worked so hard to maintain. And yet there was no joy in it, no triumph, no sense of satisfaction. I had done what I set out to do. I had exposed Marcus for who he truly was. I had reclaimed what was mine, the house, the family fortune, and most importantly, the truth. But now, standing in the aftermath, I was left with an emptiness I hadn't anticipated. The family had been torn apart, and though I had won, I couldn't shake the feeling that something essential had been lost. Lily and I spent the next few days cleaning up the mess, sorting through the aftermath of Marcus's deceit, sorting through the remnants of a life we once thought we knew. I had to go through the house, the business records, and the bank statements one last time to ensure that Marcus had left nothing else behind. There was nothing more to discover, but the process of closing that chapter took more out of me than I expected. "Dad, do you ever regret it?" Lily asked one evening as we sat together in the now silent living room. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, filling the room with a low, constant hum. "I mean, I know what he did was wrong, but everything's different now. The family, the business. You didn't just get back what was ours. You destroyed everything he built." I looked at her, my heart heavy. "Regret? I don't set no. I had no choice. He took everything from me, from us. He used his charm to manipulate everyone around him. But no, I don't set regret fighting for what sets right." She nodded slowly, but I could tell she wasn't set convinced. "I understand, but I think we both lost something. I thought I could fix it, but I was wrong. I didn't set know what was at stake." I sighed, rubbing my temples. The weight of the past weeks, of the lies and the betrayal, was starting to sink in. We didn't just lose Marcus, Lily. We lost the idea of who he was. We lost the trust we had in him. The belief that family always comes first. That's what's hardest to deal with. Not the money, not the house, but the trust. Lily sat in silence, looking down at her hands. It was clear that she was still processing the extent of what had happened. Her relationship with Marcus, once so strong, was fractured beyond repair, and that was the real cost of everything that had transpired. We could rebuild the family legacy, we could reclaim the business, but we could never repair the emotional damage done by Marcus's betrayal. The next day, I had to take action. I had to make sure Marcus couldn't come back, couldn't attempt to reclaim what I had taken from him. The legal battle wasn't over. There was still work to be done to secure everything, to make sure Marcus had no further claim on what was rightfully mine. I met with Daniel again, my trusted lawyer and ally. He had been instrumental in everything so far, and now I needed him more than ever. "Simon," Daniel began, flipping through some papers, "we've got the documents to finalize everything. The family trust is officially in your name. The house, the business, the estate, everything is back where it should be. But I have to be honest with you. Marcus won't go down without a fight. He's going to try to get a lawyer and drag this out. The longer you wait, the more he'll be able to regroup." I nodded, my jaw clenched. "I don't set care, he sets already lost. He one set get back into this. We still lock everything down." "We still lock it down," Daniel agreed, "but be prepared. There are still some legal hurdles ahead. Marcus isn't just going to let go of his pride that easily." I leaned back in my chair, my mind running through the next steps. Marcus might try to come back, but he couldn't, not now. I had built too much in the last few weeks. The business was stable again, and the family was slowly finding its footing. I had recovered more than just material wealth. I had reclaimed my dignity and my sense of justice. I had earned that, and no one could take it from me. That night, as I sat in the stillness of my office, I reflected on everything that had happened: the betrayal, the planning, the execution. I had played the long game, and now, for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my life again. The heavy weight of grief, of loss, was still there, but it was lighter now. The darkness had finally lifted, and I could breathe again. I wasn't sure what came next. Maybe there would always be some scars left behind. Maybe Lily and I would never fully heal from the wounds Marcus had inflicted. But I knew one thing for sure: I had done what was right. I had set things right. And I had made sure that Marcus would never again have the power to hurt us. The justice I had fought for wasn't just about retribution. It was about reclaiming my life, my family's legacy, and my own peace of mind. It was about rebuilding from the ashes of betrayal and finding a way to move forward. I had found that peace, but it had come at a price. Justice, I whispered to myself, is it always clean? Does it always bring satisfaction? But it sets the price we pay for the truth. The days after Marcus's departure were quieter than I had expected, and that in itself felt strange. I had imagined that when I finally exposed the truth, when I finally took back what was mine, there would be some grand sense of satisfaction, but there wasn't. Instead, there was an overwhelming silence, a stillness that seemed to hang in the air long after the confrontation had ended. I had reclaimed everything: the family legacy, the house, the business, my dignity. Marcus was gone, his deceit exposed for everyone to see, but somehow it felt hollow. What had I really gained? The money, the assets, those were things, tangible things. But the emotional cost, the damage done to our family, was far harder to quantify. Lily and I had spent the past few weeks trying to rebuild. We went through the motions of cleaning up Marcus's mess: legal matters, the business's paperwork, the house's broken parts that he had ignored for years. But beneath it all, there was an unspoken tension between us. I could see her struggling to reconcile the man she once admired with the man who had stolen from us all. It was a fracture that could never truly be fixed. She would never look at Marcus the same way again, and part of me resented that. She had trusted him. She had believed in the family bond he had so carefully crafted, and now that bond was gone, irreparably shattered by the truth. No matter how much I tried to comfort her, I couldn't change the way she saw him or the way she saw me. "I don't know if I can forgive him, Dad," she had told me one night as we sat in the living room, the remnants of a quiet dinner left untouched on the table. Her voice was steady, but there was a sadness in it that mirrored my own. "I wanted to believe that he was still a part of this family, that we could fix it, but I don't know if I can." I didn't have an answer for her. What could I say? I couldn't tell her that it would be okay. I couldn't promise her that forgiveness would heal the wounds Marcus had caused. I had tried to forgive him once too, but it had cost me too much. In the end, it wasn't forgiveness that mattered. It was understanding. We both had to understand that Marcus's betrayal wasn't just a personal failure. It was a collapse of everything we had once believed in. And that was something that couldn't be undone. I spent a lot of time alone in my office, looking through the remnants of my father's old files, trying to piece together the parts of our family's legacy that Marcus had torn apart. There was a certain sense of melancholy that came with it. The business wasn't the same without the old man, and no matter how much I reclaimed, it didn't bring him back. The family estate was mine again, but it didn't feel like home. It felt like a monument to what had been lost. I had won my revenge. I had exposed Marcus. But I didn't feel like a victor. I felt like a man who had fought for something, only to realize that winning didn't always feel like success. It often felt like loss. I walked through the halls of the house one evening, the weight of my footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. Everything had changed. The rooms that had once been filled with laughter, with warmth, now felt cold and foreign. The house was no longer a home. It was just walls, rooms, and memories of a life that couldn't be reclaimed. I thought back to the night of the family dinner. When everything had come crashing down, I had expected to feel a sense of justice, of closure, but what I felt was emptiness. The justice had come, but the emotional cost was high. Marcus was gone, but so was the brother I had once known. The family I had fought so hard to protect had been torn apart in the process. And what had I gained? The house? The fortune? Yes, I had reclaimed those things, but they felt insignificant compared to what had been lost. The family bond that had once been my foundation was gone. There was no rebuilding it. Lily and I had talked a few more times, and though she was healing, there was always that distance between us. I could see the change in her eyes, the way she looked at me now. She was proud of what I had done, proud of the fact that I had stood up for what was right. But there was a quiet sadness there too, a sadness that spoke of the loss of innocence, of family, of trust. It was a painful thing to accept, but I understood Marcus had broken more than just the will. He had broken us. As I stood in the silence of the house, I reflected on everything that had happened, the lies, the revenge, the justice, and I realized something important. Revenge had given me back what I thought I wanted, but it hadn't given me what I needed. What I needed was healing. What I needed was peace, and that was something I had to find on my own. Without Marcus, without the business, without the legacy. The truth was, justice wasn't as simple as right and wrong. It wasn't as clear-cut as I had once believed. It was messy, it was complicated, and it came at a cost that I wasn't sure was worth paying. In the end, the most important lesson I learned wasn't about revenge. It was about understanding what I had lost and finding a way to move forward, not just for myself, but for Lily too. Justice, I thought to myself, is it just about what you take back? Is it about what you can live with? It's strange, how life keeps moving forward even when everything you thought you knew has fallen apart. After Marcus left, after the dust settled, the house began to feel less like a battlefield and more like an empty shell. The walls, once filled with the echo of my father's laughter, now held only silence, and with that silence came an overwhelming feeling of emptiness, a hollow sense of victory that I had never anticipated. I sat at my father's old desk one evening, staring out the window at the house I had fought so hard to reclaim. The snow was falling gently, blanketing everything in a soft, quiet veil. It was peaceful, but it felt detached, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. I had won. I had exposed Marcus for the fraud he was, and I had taken back the legacy that should have always been mine, but none of that seemed to matter anymore. I thought that after everything I'd been through, I would feel complete. I thought that taking revenge would fill the empty space left behind by Marcus's betrayal. But it hadn't. It had only highlighted the void that remained. The house wasn't home anymore. The business wasn't mine the way it used to be. And the family, what was left of it, was still broken. Lily and I had been trying to rebuild, but it wasn't easy. She had changed, and so had I. We both had scars, though they were different. She couldn't erase the image of Marcus, the man she had looked up to, the uncle she had trusted, and I couldn't erase the guilt of what I had done. The revenge had been necessary, but it hadn't brought peace. It had brought a sense of finality, but at the cost of something deeper, something I couldn't quite name. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself, Dad. Lily had said one night, after we'd spent hours going through old family photos, memories of a time when things felt simpler, when we had been a family. I know Marcus was wrong, but he was still my uncle. And it feels like I've lost more than just him. I've lost the part of me that thought family could never be broken. I had no answer for her. How could I explain to her that sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who betray you? How could I tell her that the cost of justice wasn't just measured in what you take back, but in what you lose in the process? The pain of seeing Lily struggle with the truth of who Marcus really was harder than anything I had faced during the entire ordeal. It was a kind of loss I hadn't prepared for. I thought of all the years I had spent building my life, my family, my business. I had done it all with the belief that everything was held together by trust, by family. But Marcus had shown me just how fragile that trust was. He had torn everything down with a few calculated moves, and I had been forced to rebuild from the rubble. I had reclaimed the business, the house, and the fortune, but I couldn't reclaim the trust I had once shared with him or with the family that had stood by him. And then there was the legacy. The legacy my father had worked so hard to build. The legacy that had been torn apart by greed and deceit. I had spent so much of my life protecting it, preserving it, and I had thought that by reclaiming it, I would find peace. But what I found was that the legacy wasn't just about money or property, it was about the relationships that had been destroyed, the ties that had been severed, and the truth that had been buried. I spent a lot of time reflecting on all of this, on the betrayal, the revenge, and the aftermath. What did it all mean in the end? Was it worth it? I had gotten what I wanted, but at what cost? I couldn't answer that right away. But over time, I began to understand something important. Revenge had given me back what I thought I wanted, but it hadn't given me what I needed. What I needed was healing. What I needed was a chance to rebuild. Not just the business, but the relationships that had been broken. And most of all, what I needed was peace. It took time. It took patience. But eventually, Lily and I began to heal, slowly. We talked more. We acknowledged the pain we had both been through, the betrayal that had shaken us to our core. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but it was real. We started to rebuild the trust that had been lost. Not all at once, but in small steps, in quiet moments of understanding and acceptance. I never thought I would say this, but I realized that revenge wasn't the answer. Justice, maybe, but revenge was just a temporary fix, a way to make things right in the moment. The real work was in the aftermath, in the quiet healing that comes after the storm, in rebuilding what had been broken, not by taking but by giving, by understanding the cost of what we had lost, and making peace with it. One evening, as we sat together by the fire, Lily turned to me with a small smile. "I think I'm starting to understand," she said softly, "that we can undo what happened, but we can rebuild, and maybe, just maybe, we shall find peace again." I nodded, my heart heavy but full of hope. "We will, Lily, we will." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. It wasn't about the money or the legacy or even the business. It was about family, about rebuilding, about forgiveness, and about finding peace in the aftermath of everything that had happened.